Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dario Health. Manage your blood glucose levels, increase your possibilities. By Gvoke Hypopen, the first premixed auto-injector for very low blood sugar. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, I wanted to try something a little different. As we enter the end of 2021 and look ahead to next year, I thought it would be a good time to sort of take stock of diabetes technology. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Simms, and we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. And while this community likes to say we are not waiting, frankly, there is a lot of stuff that we are waiting for right now. I asked a couple of friends who really have their finger on the pulse of this stuff to come on and share their thoughts. The only problem, we really like to talk. So this is a longer episode than I expected. And frankly, it's not just that we like to talk. There's just a lot of technology that we are waiting for. So to that end, I'm just going to jump right in. We'll do the quick ad that we always do at the top, and then we'll get to the panel. There is also video if you prefer to watch our conversation. That's over on the YouTube channel. I'll link it up in the show notes, but we are not showing any product. So it's really just about whether you prefer audio or video. All right, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dario Health. And the bottom line is you need a plan of action with diabetes. We've been lucky that Benny's endocrinologist has helped us with that and that he understands the plan has to change as Benny, my son, gets older. You want that kind of support, so take your diabetes management to the next level with Dario Health. Their published studies demonstrate high-impact results for active users, like improved in-range percentage within 3 hyperglycemic events. Try Dario's Diabetes Success Plan and make a difference in your diabetes management. Go to mydario.com/diabetes-connections for more proven results and for information about the plan. And as always, this podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. All right, welcome. We're trying something new on Diabetes Connections, and that is the first of its kind of tech panel. And I am joined in this conversation by Chris Wilson and Camille Armaki. And these are two guys that I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit, but that I follow for technology news as well as for some analysis. So thank you both for jumping on with me. You're not industry people, but let me ask you to kind of describe yourselves first, Chris. You are somebody that I always turn to for the insight and information about technology, but this is not what you do for a living.
No, not really. I sort of jumped into the diabetes online community when I reached a point where I had access to insurance and could actually look at diabetes technology because it became affordable. And at that point, started jumping into a lot of the groups and online discussions, trying to figure out what I was interested in for myself at the time. And then over time, I wound up being asked to join the admin team of a couple of the bigger Facebook groups, getting involved on Twitter and other platforms. And so now as part of that role, I sort of find and analyze, listen to the investor calls that the companies do, sort of keep an ear to the ground, hear what people's sales reps and endos are whispering about to their patient populations and glean some information from that. I've also been a frequent participant in research, especially in clinical trials. I was in the clinical trial for the G6 that proved that acetaminophen didn't interfere with it. I was in the clinical trial for the Xeris Gvoke. I was in the clinical trial for the iLet, which is still apparently ongoing. I've got a fair amount of experience from playing with stuff that isn't necessarily out yet and sort of seeing things from a different perspective than just the end product that people see when they finally get it prescribed from their doctors.
That's great. And Camille, you are better known as Nerdabetic on social media. Many people probably recognized your Omnipod. Those are Omnipod pods lit up right behind you.
That is absolutely right. That is 550 insulin omnipods. Most of them, this is very DIY, most of them actually placed with LED lights and painted, and we stuck them on a temporary wall kind of thing, and we glued them all. So yeah, this is one of the proudest things I've ever done as a neurodiabetic. I also can't really take credit. My dad did 95% of this. I only painted a couple of walls, and I feel like I'm taking all the credit. So massive shout out to him.
I love it. I love it. And as Nerdibetic, you are known for interviewing CEOs, getting all sorts of tech information out there. And we'll probably mention this at least once later on. You do a lot of, you do some 3D printing, right? To see what the items might look like.
Yeah. So I've been running my YouTube channel for, I think, 4 years at this point, just when I started university, and I just graduated this summer. So kind of, it was over 4 years ago. So you've just been trying out different things within that channel. One of them was 3D printing. I'm absolutely fascinated by that technology. I don't own a 3D printer, but I think it is a very interesting way of giving an idea, a bit of a tangible feel to it. So I've been doing that, and all of those things they mentioned. And most recently, I had the honor of speaking to some pretty important people in the industry to see what's been happening over there as well.
Cool. All right. And Camille is in the UK. Obviously, you sound like you are based in the UK, but you are there now, which means some of this discussion will include information from the US FDA, or at least we're going to speculate about that. Same thing, European CE mark, but some differentiation of products there. But I just thought it'd be fun to talk to you guys. So, all right, we've got it out there. And I'm a diabetes mom. I read stuff. I listen to stuff. I don't think quite as much as Chris or Camille, but that's my knowledge base. So just to be clear, nobody here works for the FDA. Nobody here works for a diabetes company. We are just observing and we're speculating, which I think would be some pretty fun and interesting conversation. We'll see. So let's start by talking about what is in front of the FDA right now, because this year and last year had seen some big delays due to COVID. So we're waiting. I mean, it's been a long time. Let's start with Omnipod 5. And that is, of course, still, as we are speaking, I mean, who knows what'll happen today or tomorrow, but it is still in front of the FDA. But what's interesting is when they submitted, and Camille, I know you talked to their CEO recently. I talked to her, I believe, right before they submitted. It was going to be very different from the other commercial hybrid closed loops in that the range was going to be lower. In other words, your blood sugar range initially, I believe, was supposed to be able to get below 100 as a set point, but now it's 110. And they do have all sorts of really interesting other features. What did Stacey Petrovic, the CEO of Omnipod, share with you recently when you talked to her? Anything change or anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, so I've spoken to her a couple of weeks ago at this point. And the product that they've submitted to the FDA, from my understanding, has a target glucose which goes as low as 110 and can be customized up to 150 milligrams per deciliter. In terms of the actual product, I think I'm very excited about Omnipod 5 because it will be the first product, the first pump which actually talks directly to the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. So there will be no need to carry a physical controller, which obviously I think makes sense for a product like Omnipod because, you know, you wear it on your body and so it will connect directly. In terms of actual updates to submission, as of a couple of weeks ago, she said they still expecting it by the end of the year with a limited release in the US. And during that interview, which was slightly kind of European focused, we talked about many things, including Omnipod on the runway during Italy's Fashion Week in Milan. But she also mentioned that they hoping to bring that technology to Europe, to the UK, once they get their FDA approval.
When you said the first one or the only one, do you mean in the UK? Because we've got Dexcom talking to Tandem, at least here in the States.
First one where you don't need, so where the pod talks, wearable talks directly.
Oh, pod, okay.
Yeah, pod talks directly to the G6.
Is Control-IQ approved in the UK? Stupid question.
Yes, we have. So at the moment we have Control-IQ and 780G, which we will, I'm sure, mention at some point. Yeah.
Okay.
And CAM-APS, actually. So we have 3 other countries across Europe. They have other systems like Diaboloop as well. France, Germany, but we don't have that one here yet. Hashtag Brexit.
I was going to say show off, but then, it's not in the UK. And there's other systems coming too that we may get to. Chris, anything that you have heard over the last year in terms of Omnipod 5? I mean, I just feel like we're kind of waiting.
I mean, just from my view on the outside, I think that Insulet's estimates of hopefully getting it before the end of the year are probably right. I know that it did qualify as a breakthrough device, so it's supposed to have a faster review at the FDA. But we're still dealing with the COVID backlog with all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's things that we probably expected 6 months ago that are still pending. And I know there's always rumors circulating that this got approved, but it hasn't been released yet. And so half the time I'm going and checking the FDA database for what approvals were announced in the last week.
Oh my gosh.
Only Chris does this kind of stuff.
That's why we love him. I did have an interesting question from a listener who was talking about, okay, so as of we're taping, Dexcom G7 has not yet been submitted to the US FDA. It has been submitted in Europe. And her thought was like, oh my gosh, if Omnipod has been sitting there all this time and Dexcom hasn't even submitted, how much longer is it going to take? And my point to her was, it's not as though Omnipod and these other submissions are just sitting in a file cabinet, right? I mean, they are actively being looked at. You're both nodding. Can you tell me a little bit about what we know? I mean, these submissions, again, they don't just land on a desk and then one day someone opens them and rubber stamps them. Back to our conversation in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Gvoke Hypopen. And you know, low blood sugar feels horrible. You can get shaky and sweaty or even feel like you're going to pass out. There are a lot of symptoms and they can be different for everyone. I am so glad we have a different option to treat very low blood sugar. Gvoke Hypopen. It's the first auto-injector to treat very low blood sugar. Gvoke Hypopen is premixed and ready to go with no visible needle. Before Gvoke, people needed to go through a lot of steps to get glucagon treatments ready to be used, and this made emergency situations even more challenging and stressful. This is so much better, and I'm grateful we have it on hand. Find out more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Gvoke logo. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Now, back to Chris answering my question about FDA submissions.
Yeah, so throughout the pandemic, the main reason as to why we have a backlog is that regulators that used to regulate, that were in charge of regulating medical devices like continuous glucose monitors, hybrid closed-loop systems, and this is across actually Europe and US, it's very similar. Simply because of the pandemic, they were actually responsible for overseeing all of the medical queries related to the pandemic, from, vaccines, emergency authorizations. So that's what we call when a product is used in a slightly different way, to kind of simplify it. And using of CGM in hospital is a good example of that. We've seen an emergency authorization of that. So they've kind of, those things took priority. So that's why we have a backlog. But now they, from my understanding, kind of back on track and, full hands on that backlog, working their way through it.
There's just only so many people to do the work. And I mean, even when stuff's in development, there's always a lot of back and forth between the company that's developing it and the FDA. What are you going to require us to do? And so then they alter the product design sometimes to make it fit what the FDA wants. And that can even go into as deep as the training modules and the other information that gets given to patients when the product is prescribed. They're looking at all of that. They're looking at human factors testing. Are people, able to follow the directions and use it the way that it's intended to be used? Or are they going to do something stupid and mess it up? So they're looking at all of that, and then they're going through all of that data on all of the different aspects of the devices and needing to decide, okay, is this safe enough to actually be effective? And there are different standards in Europe versus in the US. The FDA has much higher safety thresholds, whereas the European standard is basically, does it do what it says it's going to do?
And just to close off on Omnipod 5, I think FDA has, I don't know if Chris, you would agree, this is just my personal opinion, I think FDA has been pretty scared of going to phone control. And because to date, there isn't an insulin pump which offers, remote bolus capabilities. And that's part of Omnipod 5. That's what they've submitted to them. So, my speculation would be that if actually they didn't submit phone control within that first submission, maybe we already, maybe it would be here already. It is an area that FDA has been very cautious about. So I guess that's a significant factor contributing to the backlog as well, to the delay.
Well, and that brings us to our next item that's in front of the FDA. Thank you for setting that up. So Tandem has also submitted in the last year and is waiting for bolus by phone. That's not the official name of it, but I agree with you. I think the FDA is really taking a very, very careful look at that bit of technology. And Tandem, I believe, to your point, Chris, there has been some back and forth. They don't issue press releases every time they ask for that, but it is happening. I think, to me, as the mom of a kid who takes his phone everywhere, this is something that I cannot wait for. I mean, bolus by phone just seems like such a basic capability in 2021, but of course it's a medical device and it's your phone. Chris, are you hearing anything, or do you have any opinion on that?
I mean, at least as far as Tandem goes, I think there's less of a risk because you still actually have the physical pump that can be used to do something if for some reason there's a problem with the phone. If you're relying exclusively on the phone, you've got to worry about what happens if it gets lost, what happens if there are dead batteries, what happens if you unlock it and hand it to your kid to play a game and the kid goes into your bolus app and accidentally gives you 15 or 20 units of bolus while they're tapping around. I mean, all of those things need to be taken into consideration and mitigated as much as possible.
I wonder, Camille, it's interesting to think about Omnipod because when I've talked to them, I've always asked, why can't you put some buttons on the pod? And their point was, and I think this relates to Chris's point from the phone, their point has always been, well, it's for safety with the pediatric patients. They don't want the kids touching the pod, pressing buttons. This makes perfect sense. I was a parent of 2 small children. They're going to touch everything. But it's kind of the flip side now on the phone, right? So it's an interesting look to see what you trade off in a way.
So actually, to that point, in the UK, we do have an insulin pump from Roche called AcuCheck Solo. And on the high level, it's kind of like an Omnipod, where it's a pod-like device that you put on your body and actually has 2 buttons on it. So you can actually bolus from the patch itself. And the way they've actually engineered it is that you need to press both buttons at the same time to ensure that you don't kind of, lean on you could very easily lean on a button and just press it. Other companies have gone down that route. As an Omnipod user, I do use Omnipod. So I use Dexcom and Omnipod in a DIY setting. And I love the simplicity of it. So massive, massive fan.
I think it's just all trade-offs, right? I mean, there's no perfect system, I don't think, but
everyone has their own perfect. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Chris, what do you use, if you don't mind me asking?
I am on a Tandem with Control IQ, although I don't use it exactly as designed. I've been working with better bolus strategies and playing with the modes that it gets put in, be it exercise or sleep, that change some of the targets that it's trying to hit to get it to behave a little bit more like I think it should.
So you're using Control IQ, and Camille, you're using Loop?
Loop, that's right. Yeah, on the iPhone. Yeah.
All right. I don't want to move on from Tandem quite yet, but I want to talk about Loop in a moment. So we've got bolus by phone in front of the FDA, which we also think approval could come by the end of the year. But Tandem moved their submission for T-Sport, right? They were going to submit that in 2021. Chris, they are moving that to 2022, right?
That was the last that I heard, yes.
Yeah. Camille, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I agree. That's what my understanding of the T-Sport is. I think they had some communication with FDA with the phone control, which obviously plays into T-Sport as well. Like the point Chris was making, there's no display, I don't think, on the, although, it's a patch, it's kind of moving into that kind of tubeless, tube hybrid mode kind of pump. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they decided it's pushed back further.
And I should have set that up better. If you're not familiar, the T-Sport is a very tiny version of the T-Slim. To me, it looks kind of like a beefed up cartridge, and it sticks somehow to your body. There is still a tube and there is still an inset, but it kind of, I don't know if it dangles off or it sticks some, I don't know. So they haven't released that. I've asked a bunch of people when Lilly a while ago was coming up with its own pump and it was supposed to be inset and sticky. I'm still trying to figure out how it's supposed to stick to your body with an inset, and they haven't really explained that. So maybe at some point. But Camille, you made a 3D version of this yourself, right? Didn't you mock up a T-Sport at one point and freak everybody out because we thought you had one?
I did. So just on that entire idea in general, there's actually a pump it's been kind of out here in Europe and it's been taken off the market, and I think it's coming back at some point, called Kaleido, which uses a similar idea of sticky with
bright colors.
Bright colors, yeah. So that's kind of It's an interesting concept because you have an infusion set and like a sticky that you put on your body. And I think that's what Tandem is going with as well. But yeah, I did. It's very interesting how people often will look at, especially on YouTube, because it's a very visual form. They will look at a picture without watching the video. And yeah, a lot of people thought I had some insider info on the T-spot, which was a very interesting experiment, and reading a lot of comments about that, going like, where did you get this? And I'm like, I didn't. 3D print. Hello, it's 2020.
Be careful. Be careful. Hey,
well, I need to take some of the blame, actually, I think, for potential delays on the T-Sport. I was involved in some of the human factors testing. And based on some of the questions that I got asked afterwards, I think I may have done some things that they weren't expecting. It's some stupid things or something that was not anticipated. So that may actually be the source of some of the...
All right, wait. If you can't answer, I understand. What the heck could you have done? What did you
do? I think it was just a case of directions weren't necessarily clear, or I was expecting, think about this rather than actually do it. I obviously can't go into specifics, but needless to say, I clearly wasn't doing everything that they expected as part of the tasks in the testing. So who knows? That may be part of the reason that things got delayed. But hey, if it prevents somebody else from doing the stupid things that I did and having a problem later on, then that's actually a good thing.
And actually, I'm so glad that you did, Chris, because so many companies have tried this idea of, having a patch and then a short tube. Sonovo, they went out of business. Kaleido also really struggling. We don't really know if they're going to come back. And Tandem is now trying their kind of stab at it. No one has really made this idea work. So,
It's a good point. But one thing I do like, again, I don't have diabetes. I don't wear the devices. But the idea I like is that with an inset, you do have a choice of how it connects, angled or what the cannula length is, or steel. With Omnipod, you don't have as many options in terms of how it connects. Now, many people will say to counter that, well, you have many more options of where you can put it. So it really just depends on how you wear it, what you're comfortable with. But I think that's why they keep trying, Camila, because there's that different kind of inset that people can use. So who knows? But I think that's a really good point.
Well, and it's a great example of how your diabetes may vary.
Yeah.
No one solution is going to work for everyone. So that's why it's important that we have these options.
All right. So let's talk about Loop. One of the other submissions, this is such a laundry list in front of the FDA, is Tidepool Loop. And that was submitted earlier in 2021. It's been very quiet, but it's hanging out there. Anybody hear anything? Anybody know anything? Any comments?
I really haven't heard anything. I mean, so pure speculation, obviously, this coming from the open source community is going to be subject to a lot, probably more scrutiny than if it's coming from an established player. And I was not entirely clear on exactly what the trials for approval looked like. It sounded like some of the DIY data from DIY Loop may have actually been used as part of the submission. So I would imagine that that's probably at least one of the things that may be taking a little bit extra time, because I have a feeling that the FDA is probably going to look a little bit more closely at that than they would if it was coming directly from Insulet or someone else.
That's a good point. And it was used. I believe that's what they told me earlier this year, was a lot of that open source, a lot of that DIY community data was put in. So you wonder what then the FDA came back and asked for. No, what we really need is, or no, that is enough. I mean, we'll find out later, but it's very interesting stuff.
And in some ways, it is a perfect storm, because it is using that DIY technology, which is just absolutely amazing. I mean, the whole Tidepool team has been so tremendous in this project. So it's taking that DIY, but then also the phone control point that we mentioned earlier, where it's an Omnipod. So actually, if your battery dies, I'm sure everybody is asking those questions. If your iPhone dies, how is a child going to bolus? I'm sure that those are the questions that, a regulated system has to, they need to know the answers for that. So I'm sure they're facing similar scrutiny on the phone point, just like Omnipod 5 does with Insulet.
This just occurred to me, and again, I don't use the system, so that's probably why I didn't think about it, but these DIY systems that already use the phone, can you use your watch to control them too? Camille, I wonder if that's something that's
Yes, you can, but it's just like with Dexcom, you still need your phone. So phone is like the house, the home of the whole system. You can remotely, bolus and enter carbohydrates, announce meals, etc., using your Apple Watch. But a phone is still required to actually do all of the calculations, the brain behind all of it. On Omnipod 5, that is all happening on the pod. But with Tidal Loop, that's all happening on the phone, just like with the DIY system.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
So you really need that to make the system work. And there are all of those, your phone dying, someone stealing your phone, cases that, I'm sure FDA wants answers for.
To be clear, because a lot of information there, I think this is a good point. Omnipod 5, as you said, controlled by the pod. So you lose your phone, it keeps on trucking, it's going to deliver basal. The loop will continue. A Tide Pool Loop and Loop DIY, whatever it's called right now, is all controlled by the phone. So if your phone dies, the system won't continue?
Well, so by design, it will always deliver background insulin in the way that it's intended.
Okay.
So, I mean, my phone dies sometimes, it's live, right? I'm a 23-year-old. I don't always have my power bank with me because it is difficult to keep it charged in the pub. So, it does happen. So, and those are kind of a real world cases that, I'm sure FDA is also asking about. So with the DIY system, and I would assume with Tidal Loop as well, but that is just my speculation. When your phone dies with the DIY system, it automatically goes to the default background rates. But you cannot bolus because you need your phone to do that. And I would assume it would be relatively similar with Tidal Loop because I don't think they would be making a separate backup device like Omnipod is doing with Omnipod 5.
Okay, thanks. All right, last item that is in front of the FDA, I think, is the Medtronic 780, which is already available in Europe. Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And if you're a veteran, the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitoring system is now available at Veterans Affairs pharmacies in the United States. Qualified veterans with type 1 and type 2 diabetes may be covered. And picking up your Dexcom supplies at the VA pharmacy may save you a lot of time, too. Connect with your doctor for more information. Dexcom even has a discussion guide you can bring with you. I know it can be hard to know what questions to ask. Get that guide. Find out more about eligibility at dexcom.com/veterans. Now back to Camille answering my question about whether the Medtronic 780 is available in Europe.
That's right.
Okay.
So 780G has been here for, it's been approved last summer. So kind of just as COVID was kind of a couple of months in, and it's been rolled out across various countries in Europe. I think we got it in the UK earlier this year. Well, I think the 770G is the newest version that you guys have in the US. So the 700 pumps, they all have Bluetooth built in. So you can have your pump alarms, all of that on your phone. No control, but you can view everything. But the 780 is kind of the newest pump in that line, which has a new brain, new algorithm. In my view, it is completely different because actually it's not really made by Medtronic. It's made by an Israeli company called DreamMed. So
That's right. The algorithm is from DreamMed. I've interviewed them. I forgot about that.
So I actually said that in one of my videos, and Medtronic wasn't really happy with me. So
they're like, we have it. It's ours now.
They officially said something like it's built by DreamMed with Medtronic engineers. So, it is a partnership between them. And that's apparently true. I have no reason to deny that. So I'm sure they work together on it. But, the foundation of 780G is actually completely different. It's not like they took 670 and added a couple of capabilities. It's a complete redesign. I mean, on the outside, it looks the same, but actually the actual brain inside is completely different. And I guess one of the key things that we mentioned is actually the ability to have your glucose set as low as 100. People with diabetes across Europe, they've been really kind of enjoying that. And it has automatic corrections as well. Right. So a lot of people listening to this might not be as techy as we are. So just in simple terms, it kind of matches Control IQ, I would kind of say, in terms of the feature set. Maybe slightly better because you can reduce your target to 100, which I know a lot of people have been asking about. I don't know if you would agree, Chris, with that, saying that's kind of at the same level as Control IQ.
From a tech perspective, yeah, they both the key different or the key feature there is the automated correction boluses. which is what differentiates what they call an advanced hybrid closed loop from just a standard hybrid closed loop, which is what the 670 and 770 were. It's nice to see more high-tech options coming to the market from more players, since it gives people more options.
That's interesting, though, about any kind of criticism for mentioning DreamEd, because, I mean, Control IQ was developed by Type Zero Technology, right? Wasn't it like a University of Virginia thing that then Tandem bought?
Yeah, well, it got bought by Dexcom. Dexcom bought Type Zero and then licensed the tech to Tandem. So
interesting times. We should also mention that all the Medtronic systems use their sensors. This is not yet a mix and match world. I believe the Medtronic sensors, and I keep hearing that they're much better, but still need to be calibrated. So even the latest version, no, you're shaking your head. Camille, tell them, oh, that's right. We're waiting for that approval in the US.
Well, so Guardian 4 has been approved in
Guardian 4.
Europe. And so that's the no calibration version. And I know like one person who's using it. So it's not, I think they're slowly rolling it out. They haven't really started shipping it yet. But it's basically what we all know as Guardian 3, just with no calibrations. As far as I'm understanding, the accuracy is not improved. It's kind of the same, if not slightly worse from a MARD perspective with Guardian 4 compared to Guardian 3. And yeah, I think it's in the FDA backlog as well. I'm going
to go ahead and just double check that on my end, only because it'll be good to know the actual MARD from their studies and things like that. Yeah. So we'll pop that into the show notes. But I think you're exactly right, because I was just doing the time. It'll be interesting to see what the time shift is in terms of episodes being released, because we were just doing our game show. Wait, don't poke me, for Friends for Life. And I can't believe I forgot. I asked this question about Guardian 4 because the code name for it, or at least the in-house name for it, was Zeus. So we had been talking about Zeus from Medtronic for a long time, no calibrations. I know, I get in the weeds of the trivia and then I forget what I know. So thanks for correcting me on that. All right, let's talk about Dexcom, because Dexcom G7, as we're taping, G7 has not been submitted to the US FDA, but it has been submitted for European approval. Camille, you had Dexcom CEO on your show wearing and showing off the device. I was so jealous when I saw that. I'm going to yell at Kevin Sayer next time I talk to him. But yeah, tell us what that was like and what you thought of it when you saw it.
I've been a massive Dexcom advocate. I pay for my own Dex because I'm not an ambassador. I just genuinely, it's been a life-changing product for me. And it's been an honor speaking to him. So you've spoken to him a couple of weeks after they announced that they submitted for the European approval. I mean, it looks tiny, as I'm sure you've seen if you've seen the video. I'm incredibly excited to see kind of how that one develops. And from literally a couple of days ago, they kind of in the investors call, like Chris was saying, I also sometimes tune into those, and they confirmed that they're expecting to get that approved in Europe by the end of the year.
It's interesting, and Chris, maybe you could speak to this for people who might not be that familiar. The Dexcom technology, while it is very different from the G6, the speed at which it might get approval, Europe is one thing, right? US is another. This is not like an insulin pump. We don't expect it, at least, to take quite as long as insulin pumps or different systems, because it's not putting insulin into your body, right? It's just measuring.
But it is being used to calculate doses of a high-risk medication, which is insulin. There's definitely still some concern as far as how accurate it is, and if it's off, how off is it? Is it going to cause a problem? But I'm really excited with the clinical data that they presented. I think it was at EASD earlier this year, showing that the G7, the MARD, that measure of accuracy that they use is actually now under 8% with the G7, which, I mean, we're getting into how much more accurate can we reasonably get, just because there's so much variation in a human body that, I mean, you could take 6 finger pricks from 6 different fingers and get 6 different answers from a standard meter. The fact that we're really dialing in the accuracy as tight as we can, and actually Eversense is almost in the same boat with their new 180 product. They had, I think, 2 versions, I recall, but that's coming as well. And the 180-day version, as long as we're talking CGMs.
Yeah.
There is no absolute answer for anything. This is actually, I was in a study last Thursday where they were seeing how long I could go without insulin.
Oh, fun.
Wow.
But as part of it, they're monitoring it with a YSI, which is this reference grade laboratory meter that they actually do a blood draw and they centrifuge it down, and then they measure the glucose level in the plasma without any of the blood cells in it. And that device in the lab was actually not putting out the correct numbers. There was some sort of hiccup. They had to restart it to get it to come up. But my Dexcom was matching, and then they compared it to multiple ultra accurate finger stick meters and stuff to figure out what was going on. But nothing's perfect. This was a lab grade reference glucometer that's the most accurate one that you can get, and they don't even make them anymore.
I will never forget when Benny was little, like poking the same finger. You said 6 different fingers. We poked the same finger 3 times in a row because it was confusing or something. And it was always 3 different numbers. It's crazy.
I just think it's important that people keep in mind that, nothing is ever going to be perfect. Whatever device you're wearing, however you're measuring your stuff, there's always going to be variation. It's never going to be exactly the same number every time on every device.
You mentioned EverSense. That's the CGM that goes under your skin, and then the transmitter goes on top. And Camille, you've got a little bit. Are you using the Libre as well, like to test it out, or what did you show us earlier?
I am trying the Freestyle Libre 3, which is like the newest version. It's not available in the UK. I should make it very clear. Someone bought it for me in Germany, and they imported it over to the UK.
You guys.
It's actually been very interesting over here because obviously it's not available in the UK. So I had to, and with Freestyle Libre 3, there's no physical receiver. You need to get an app.
You can only use your phone.
You can only use your phone. There's no physical reader. There's no physical device, which I don't know how that's going to work with, children going to school and, having to carry phones. But anyway, it's not available in the British App Store. So I had to create a German Apple ID, and everything on my phone is German. So like German Apple Music, German podcasts, everything is in German. It's just the language of it is still English. But other than that, I have been enjoying my German lifestyle over I've had it for 4 days now. So it's been
What are the different features? Like I'm not as familiar with the Libre system. So what is new with the 3?
It's much smaller. It's much smaller compared to the first 2. And on a high level, it works exactly like you would expect a CGM to work, like Dexcom, where there's no scanning. It just always shows the value and your glucose, your trends, alarms, everything on your phone. So they kind of made it work in exactly the same way as EverSense or Dexcom. Most importantly for me, they keep it in the same price. And I think that's very important for a lot of people with diabetes here in Europe because, Libre has been a giant success in the UK, for example, just because of its price point, it is accessible to the National Health Service. So it is, reimbursed to, vast majority, pretty much every single person with type 1 who wants it can get it.
Wow.
And Libre 2 is the same price point as Libre 1 and now Libre 3. In Germany, where they did launch, it's also the same price. So they're keeping it the same, which is very reassuring. In terms of access.
We'll see what happens in the US, but that is very reassuring for our friends in Europe. One device I meant to ask about and didn't, but I don't think it's been submitted, and that is Beta Bionics and the iLet. And Chris, you kind of alluded to this much earlier in our talk because you were, I believe, in one of those trials.
I was at least told that I was patient number 1 at the trial site that I was at.
But we don't know for sure. They have not submitted. I don't think. Or have they?
Well, I keep hearing parents and other patients still, people with diabetes still saying, I just finished my time in the primary phase of the trial for the iLet, or now my kid is going into the extension phase, things like that. So if the trial is ongoing, clearly I don't think they've submitted yet. It's definitely more hands-off. I won't lie, my time and range did go down a little bit when I was on it.
But your time and range, we should specify, is extremely high.
Right. My 90-day average right now is 94%. A week going into the current trial, the arm of the trial that I just finished, was actually 97. So
it's all relative, in other words, but it did go down.
Terrible, Chris, I tell you, yeah.
But it's a good point in that, the iLet is much more hands-off, as you mentioned.
Right. It's, no correction boluses. There's not even a mechanism to do it. All you can really do is tell it when you're eating and give it a rough guesstimate as to the meal size. So I would imagine, especially for people who want to be more hands-off with their diabetes and have good control, because if the control wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, that it'll be a very good option for a lot of people once it does get approved. And this is the insulin-only version. We've still got the version with insulin and glucagon. Having both a gas and a brake will definitely make it easier to drive the car going forward in the next version. So we're looking forward to them starting the trials on that as well.
Yeah, it is all relative. I mean, I just think about my son. He misses a couple of meal boluses a week for sure. And I think he would happily trade off control, to just have that kind of stuff be taken care of. It's so interesting to see how, I know we're going to get so many questions. How does Chris get so much time in range? What is he doing with Control IQ? Is he? So that'll be another episode, tips and tricks from Chris too. Or maybe the tips and tricks, Camille, is just spend a lot of your time in diabetes trials.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Yeah. I know that's not it, but.
Well, I don't know what my time in range is, but it's nowhere near that. But I'm very happy with it. I like to say that my time in happiness, though, is 98, if not 100%.
There you go.
And that's what matters.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
We joke about do a lot of trials and it helps, but there is definitely some truth to that. I mean, I get to talk to and interact with some of the top endocrinologists in the world. Right. Sometimes, on a weekly basis. So I'm going into the clinic to have an injection of something that they're testing out, or to check in and let them download the data from a device that I'm testing. And half the time we're chatting while they're doing other stuff and, discussing the theories that underlie a lot of this stuff. And it definitely deepens your understanding. If you want to really understand diabetes more and more like an endocrinologist does, it's a great way to gain some experience.
Let's talk a little bit. We've talked about what's happening and what we're waiting for. So let's talk a little bit about what we're excited for, and not just the products that we mentioned, but if there's anything else that's on your mind. I'm curious what you guys who live with diabetes, you use these devices, you follow this tech. Chris, what are you looking forward to? And it could be something that we talked about or something that's like maybe 10 years from now.
I think probably the thing that's most interesting, to a certain extent, the tech, even if it's not there yet, we know where it's going and where sort of the endpoint is. The endpoint is you wear a sensor, you wear a pump, and it does everything for you, and you don't need to worry about it. But beyond that, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is seeing the medications that were originally designed for type 2s being used in more type 1s.
Yes.
Since most type 1s do have some insulin resistance, it's actually, a known thing that happens. It's partly just due to the fact that normally insulin gets made in the middle and spreads out to the edges, and we're infusing it from the edges and having it go into the middle of the circulation. But things like, I know, Stacey, you've mentioned in the past the SGLT2 drugs that help you sort of pee out the excess sugar from your blood. Those have shown really great improvements in kidney health, cardiovascular outcomes, and making those safer for type 1s, since it can cause an issue with going into DKA, even though your blood sugars stay relatively normal. That was actually the test that I was in last Thursday, was checking a new drug that as an add-on to help reduce the chance of that happening if you're a type 1 who's on one of these medications. But there's lots of different classes of medications that are coming out, things that not only enhance the function of insulin, but potentially block some of the function of glucagon to help improve things, since they've documented that a lot of type 1s, the sort of regulation and counter-regulation in the insulin glucagon axis, I guess, it does happen with a fair amount of frequency in people with type 1. So that may be something moving forward. And actually, it's not even necessarily just diabetes. They're testing this medication that they were triangling on me as an enhancement for cancer immunotherapy.
Wow.
In North Carolina. Somebody was asking me about something, and so I went on the clinical trials website and was digging into what studies are looking at this drug, and found a study that they were looking at it to see if it'll enhance the ability of some immunotherapies for breast cancer. Wow. So, a lot of this stuff may even have ripple effects outside of diabetes.
That's really amazing. All right. That's a great point. I love that. All right, Camille, you don't have to go outside of technology. I mean, that is still technology, I guess, medication. But Camille, what are you looking forward to or, looking at down the line?
I'm going to keep this one very, very simple. I'm just looking forward to seeing more access to all of this. I feel like in terms of getting incredible technology, I feel like we could summarize all of this, all of today's talk in a massive tick, right? We have incredible continuous glucose monitors, even better on the market, and even better versions of them are coming over the next year or so with G7, Libre 3, etc. Same with pumps. That technology so sadly isn't really accessible to so many people. And this applies to so many regions, so many countries. In the UK, we now have in a trial of 1,000 people with diabetes trialing closed loop technology to hopefully have our national proof that it does work. It's so frustrating actually seeing all of this because, it's like every single country wants their own proof, even though, there are so many trials from all over the world proving that, yes, actually, it does help people, but, it is a very bureaucratic process. So I'm just looking forward to actually seeing thousands, if not millions of people have access to CGM and then if they choose to hybrid closed loop therapy.
That's wonderful. All right. Before I let you go, this last question, it's not really a great follow-up to our discussion about access, but this is one that it just honestly, it drives me bananas. And I want to get your opinion on. And that is this: every other day, I feel like someone is asking me when the Apple Watch is going to monitor blood glucose non-invasively, right? I know, right? You're going to get the watch. It's going to read your blood glucose and then move on. And I get these questions all the time by people outside the diabetes community, frankly, who read about it or hear about it. What's your take? I mean, I know it's coming. I hope it's coming. I feel like I'm the hope killer. I go on these threads and I'm like, unless you see a clinical trial, right, it's not going to happen. But I feel like it is coming. It will be useful to some people sometime, right?
I think absolutely. I think there's a couple of companies that are pretty far along in the process of actually doing non-invasive glucose monitoring. I think you had an episode recently where you mentioned one where they look at the eye, fluid in the eye, which is cool. I've heard of a couple of different technologies that are being introduced using either heat at low levels, infrared, to potentially sense it, or radio signals. I believe there's a company in Israel that's working on that as well. Yeah, they're probably not good enough to necessarily dose insulin from yet, but they're getting there, and the tech keeps getting smaller and more portable and stuff. I think there's a company in Germany that's got the tabletop scale right now, where you can just basically put a finger on the sensor and it will give you an estimate of your blood sugar. And they're hoping to scale that down to being a portable device that'll be non-invasive, and then eventually a wearable device that'll be non-invasive. So it's definitely coming, but the stuff takes time. They're still figuring out sort of a lot of the ways that the various sensing technologies interact with the body and figuring out exactly how best to estimate your blood sugar from the readings that they get back. So it's coming. I've seen presentations with actually impressive accuracy, especially considering that it's non-invasive. But I don't see it anytime, at least probably not in the next couple of years, especially integrated into a consumer device like an Apple Watch.
I completely agree with Chris. I think, especially as someone living with diabetes, we tend to look at this from a medical point of view. But if this ever were to happen, it's really a health companion. And I think that entire trend of actually seeing a lot of what I would consider mainstream technology companies, Apple, Samsung, those kinds of players becoming more involved in health is a good thing. Because I think, we've heard of so many stories of, people using, Apple Watches and, being alerted that actually your heart rate is too low or too high. And actually, if you deploy that kind of capability on, a population scale, with millions of people using Apple Watches, it really drives, big changes, and it drives colossal impact on the, general population, how we live our lives. But if it ever does happen, and I mean, we hear about this all the time, and literally this year, I think it was 6 or 7 days after Apple Watch Series 7 came out, there was already a rumor saying that Apple Watch Series 8 will have it. And I saw on Twitter, and I just did this emoji. Because 6 days is the longest amount of time we can have without any rumors about Apple Watch.
It just shows you how, frankly, how much money is in it and how people want it.
It's a very kind of clickbaity, interesting topic because, it is the next frontier that, everyone is trying to tackle.
Yeah.
So I understand the excitement, and sometimes I'm probably causing it because I have talked about it as well. In my pre-nerdbetic days, I was excited about it. I've been excited about it as nerdbetic, and we can't not be excited.
Well, even this episode, someone could clip out what Chris said. It's coming.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right. Well, we do need to be realistic about it. That even when it comes in, 10, 15 years, it probably won't really have any tangible impact on any of our lives.
Being realistic. That's a very good point because it reminds me of the Vertex announcement a couple of weeks ago with the first patient in their trial got an infusion of stem cell derived islet cells and is 90% reduction in insulin use, and everybody went nuts over that. And I wound up posting a big long thread on Twitter explaining that really, this isn't the hard part yet. It's great that they're this far. It's awesome that people are pursuing different avenues. I hope they succeed, but this isn't going to be something that people are going to have in the next couple of years to just go in and get your islet infusion. And then you don't need to worry about measuring your blood glucose or wearing your pump or taking injections anymore.
I heard a great point on that, which was if they've sent a press release, it's quite different than if they've submitted for publication in a clinical journal. It was a little bit, I'll say a little meaner than that. I think the quote was something like, if it's a press release, they're looking for money. If it's in a journal, they're looking for, approval. There's some truth to that, though. And I think that that's a good thing for us to keep in mind as we stay very hopeful. This is a very hopeful crowd. And as we stay realistic as well. I think we've run the gamut. There's always so much more to talk about. So I hope you'll come back on when these things, maybe we hear more, they start to get approved, or we just talk about different things. But this was great. Thank you both so much for jumping on.
It's always fun to talk to you, Stacey.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's always great to get caught up on this stuff and kind of speculate and talk about it. So thanks so much. I appreciate you guys both being here, and we will put lots of links in the show notes and everywhere else we can find them so that people can find you on social and follow your musings and your thoughts. But I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
Lots of information there. I'm going to link up a couple of articles, some things we referenced at diabetes-connections.com. At the homepage for this episode, there is a transcription as well, as always. What do you think? I mean, I know it was long and there were a lot of things to get through, but I'd like to do that on a more regular basis, maybe with some different people in the community. Love to hear feedback from you, what questions you have, what topics you'd like us to tackle. But man, those guys really, they know the ins and outs of all of this. They really keep their finger on the pulse. So we'll follow up. We'll do more on that. This was taped, as I said, the very first week of November 2021. So in the couple of days between now and when the episode comes out, maybe something else was approved. If it happened, we will follow up on it here. All right. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. We've got In the News live every Wednesday now, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube and on Facebook, live on both channels. And then we turn it around into an audio podcast episode that airs Fridays. So I hope to see you back here for that. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.